This time on Evolution Woodworks, we're going to head back over to the CNC machine and take another stab at V-Carve Inlays. Let's see how this goes. My last attempt at a large-scale V-Carve inlay was our shop sign with our logo, and it wasn't exactly perfect, so I've gone back to the drawing board a little bit, made a few tweaks, changed a bit, and we're going to give it another shot. So the first thing I needed to do was build a couple of end grain cutting boards. After gluing everything up in the edge grain orientation, we'll let it sit in the clamps overnight, take it over to the sander to flatten it out, and then it's over to the cross-cut sled where we'll rip it into strips to make our end grain cutting board. After another night in the clamps, everything gets flattened out, then we can lock it into the CNC to get things started. This time around, I'm using an 1/8 inch bit for clearance instead of the 1/4 inch bit that I used last time, and I've changed my V-Carve bit from a 20 degree to a 15 degree bit, just trying to get a little more detail in this one. Hopefully things will line up a little bit better. The socket turned out pretty decent in the walnut, so it was onto the maple to make the plug. Since I only needed the plug to be about a 1/4 inch thick, I took it over to the bandsaw for a resaw so I could reuse this piece on another project. I used a hobby knife to clean up any loose edges that would keep us from having a perfect fit, and then I cut the outline out for the test fit. After getting everything cleaned up and trying to insert it into the board, the piece actually was way too loose, and the only thing I could think from that point was I'd changed from a 20 degree bit to a 15 degree bit and tried to use the same depths that I'd used before, and I thought maybe that just didn't work out. So I started messing around with some test settings and made some pieces, actually made just a centerpiece of the butterfly just so I could have enough detail to know if it was going to work without cutting the entire butterfly out. And I just couldn't get it to fit, and I didn't know why. So the next day I came back out and was getting ready to set up the machine again, and I realized as I was setting this bit up, the end of the bit was actually broken off. So instead of having a V-bit that went to a perfect point, I ended up with probably a good 1/16 of an inch flat on the bottom of that. So, zeroing off of that point now is going to let this bit go deeper, which with the taper on, it's actually going to cut everything, the profile, smaller. And that does explain, I was getting a little lip around the edges where the two bits were, the clearance bit and the V-Carve bit weren't coming together perfectly. So that explained all of that. So after I figured that out, I actually went back and just started making some test patterns. I made this 6-point star so I could have something simple to work with. This one was run at the original settings and it was loose anyway. So I took a big swing, changed all my dimensions. I went from 0.08 on my start depth to 0.02 with the same 0.2 flat. And that one actually came out, if this wasn't going to be a cutting board, that one actually worked out pretty decent. It's got quite a bit of room underneath it, but it does fit nice and tight. So we would have a pretty good looking board if that was it. But I don't want that gap underneath there for a cutting board, so I kept messing around with it. And I got almost back to my original settings. I still have a few thousandths of an inch underneath, room for glue. And once that's in the press, that's gonna push down nice and tight. So I'm gonna take the new bit and the new settings and we'll run another one and see how that fits. The second attempt turned out a lot better, but I did have a lot of these loose edges that I needed to clean up before I could actually glue everything together. With everything now fitting nice and tight, I could go ahead and glue this and put it in the press for the night. After the glue dried overnight, I took it to the bandsaw, cut off most of the excess from the plug, and then took it through the drum sander a few times to get everything cleaned up. Once the board was flattened out, I could finally see that everything had fit perfectly this time, so it was on to the finish sanding. All right, well, after a couple days of work, I've finally got this thing dialed in. I think the second try on the plug fit much better and the final product looks pretty good. I don't have any glue lines that I can see. There's no hollow spots in it. I think those settings are gonna work out pretty good for me. I do need to figure out what's going on with the two bits not crossing paths. There's a lot of cleanup going on there. It took a couple hours actually to clean everything up so that I could get the two to fit together right. And I'm a little bit concerned about digging around down in there with a knife because that's going to be your finished surface once you put the two pieces together. So if I accidentally knock off a corner or something, I'm gonna have a big void. I'm pretty happy with where we are at this point, and I'll get that all figured out later. All right, that's gonna do it for this one. I'll leave a link down in the description to the bits in the machine and everything that I used on this project, and I'll leave you my settings for what it's worth. Might give you a good place to start off with. So thanks for watching as always, and we'll see you in the next one. I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm just rambling. I just talk a lot and blah, blah, blah. So goodbye.